Thank you, glorious people of the interwebs. Thank you so much for joining me for another COVID-19 quarantine edition of Ask RGD. If you are new to this channel or you are unfamiliar with this video series, Ask RGD, the rules to the series are very, very simple. You ask me a guitar or guitar-related question via the comments section, via Facebook Messenger, via email, via snail mail, via smoke signals, via pigeon messenger, whatever you got. And I answer said guitar or guitar-related question in a video. So, without further ado, let's get to a question or two, shall we? So, this question comes from MetalBase79. He says, Robert, I have a question for you. I'm 40 years old and have been playing since I was 8. I've wondered for most of my life why they try so hard to make something emulate tubes instead of just making progress to make tubes more reliable and lighter weight. All the research and development goes into making something sound like something that we already have in existence. Why not just make tubes better? Great video, by the way. Now I want to try one of these Fender amps to hear how close it is to the original. Thank you, Mr. MetalBase79. Not your first Ask RGD submission, I do believe. Anyway, I started to type out a long-winded answer to this question in the comments, and I stopped myself, and I said this would make a great Ask RGD topic. So the simple answer to your question is because the market simply will not support it. There is no way, and the reason why is because well, first let's talk about some of the things that you're talking about. You're talking about making tube amps better in the sense that making them more reliable and lighter weight. Those two things specifically. And just so everybody knows, you actually commented, you left this comment on another Ask RGD video, specifically the one that I covered talking about the new Fender Tonemaster amps, which are Fender's, new solid state, basically modeling amps of their deluxe reverb and twin reverb combos. So that's what you are referring to. Now, the tube amps, of course, are very, very heavy. Most of the weight usually from tube amps usually comes from transformers. By the way, as opposed to the tubes. Those transformers are heavy. As I said, that's where most of the weight comes from. Now in the instance of a a big combo amp like a twin reverb, those things are 80 something pounds or something stupid. You're gonna have a lot of added weight because of the magnets and the speakers, particularly the older ones. And they were, honestly, I think they were just using denser wood back then as well. So that's where most of the weight comes from, as opposed to the tubes. I am not an electrical engineer. I don't know if it's possible for them to build those amps, to build them any better to where they require less maintenance. Obviously, you have to change out tubes, and sometimes, other components like transformers, among other things, have a tendency to go out. There's a lot of old Marshalls that the capacitors have a tendency to expand to a dangerous point and need to be replaced. So, for example, whether or not they could be built to where they would require less maintenance than what we currently know, or whether or not it's possible. Regardless, we'll assume that they can. The reason why they don't, and this is strictly opinion, but a pretty well educated one. As I mentioned, the reason why they won't is because, like I said, the market won't support it. And the reason why is because guitar players, as a rule, are the biggest bunch of whiny little bitches on this planet. And if you don't believe me, go to your local shop, and assuming that you have a local shop that's got a guitar tech there that's been there for a long time, and ask him about some of the customers that he has had to deal with over the years, or she, I suppose. And they will tell you some of the most minor adjustments, and regarding setups and some of the work that they've done on other people's guitars, that the owners of those guitars have complained about. And I'm willing to bet that they will probably have some pretty good stories for you, because I know my tech has got some great stories like that he has shared with me. And I've got plenty of my own just from all my years standing on the other side of the counter. Guitar players do not like change, and despite the older technology, it's hard to lug around, particularly as we get older. It's it's not always the most reliable. A lot of guitar players still got to carry a backup amp to gigs in case their main rig goes down for some reason. That's become a pretty common rule of thumb. If you're playing using a tube amp at a live gig, you better have a backup with you just in case. Guitar players don't like change. And in my opinion, there has been some pretty cool ideas for modern designs of guitar gear that have come out that just didn't take off. And the best example I can think of is the robot tuners from Gibson. A self-tuning guitar that will stay in tune as you are, playing a live show and, you're soloing, you're bending strings all over the place, especially on a Gibson with a shorter scale. Those strings are notorious for pulling out of tune slightly, just from standard lead playing or maybe not even lead playing. So to come up with a way that it will automatically go back in tune, that you don't have to stop in between songs and retune it, really in itself is not a bad idea, and does solve that particular problem. Now, without getting into how well their design actually pulled that off, that's an entirely different argument. Though I will say that the robot tuners did seem to get better and better as they went along. The final generation with the G-Force or whatever they were actually seemed to do that pretty well. Now that I've talked up the robot tuners, you couldn't pay me to put one of those G-Force systems on any single one of my guitars. I still want to tune it myself. I have absolutely no valid reason why I would not want to, give a modern technology that actually does seem like a pretty good idea a try in my own equipment. And like I said, I have no valid reason for it whatsoever other than I like my stuff the way it is. Don't mess with it. Period. End of story. And my amps are the same way. I'm still I am not going to be jumping on the modeling amp train anytime soon. It ain't happening. I just there's too many knobs and switches and stuff. I want my amp designs to be what they have always been, which is 2 or 3 channels, all tube, clean channel, gain channel, and that's what I like. That's what I like, and don't mess with it. I like my guitar set up the way that I want them. I like my amp set the way that I like them. I like the types of pedals that I like to use, and I hate all the other stuff that I hate. And I am, in that instance, I am a typical run-of-the-mill guitar player. So that's why I say that guitar players, as a rule, are a bunch of whiny little bitches, because I am one, and I can say that. So there you have it. Their companies are probably not going to be coming out with any technology like you were talking about anytime soon. Again, specifically just because there's too many people like me out there that would I don't want to say turn our noses up at it, but get real skeptical, and it's just not what we know. Now there's an entire younger generation out there. And and even part of the older generation. There's even guys out there that are older than me that that love the technology stuff. But the younger generation in particular, if it weren't for the younger generation, Line 6 probably never would have gotten off the ground. And not only that, but not only would Line 6 have never gotten off the ground, but now all the other stuff that's out there competing against Line 6 wouldn't be selling as well as it is. So there's certainly a market for that kind of stuff. But as far as making tube amps themselves better, it's either not possible or manufacturers just are not willing to put in the cost and effort into seeing if there's a market for it. This one is from S-Fear6. Hashtag Ask RGD says, how about speaker cabs? Have you tried any vertical 212 cab, and what speaker brands do you prefer? Most musicians prefer the vintage 30s. I personally like the Eminence and Jensen speakers. With 212 cabs, 412s have always been my favorite, but again, as to kind of go along with some of the things I was just talking about, I've gotten older. I don't particularly like lugging 412 cabs around everywhere anymore. You know, in the studio, you know, here, you know, recording in the studio or recording at home, you know, I almost always use a 212 nowadays. And, you know, the 212 that I use is a Seismic Audio 212 cab. I'll link that up down in the description so you can check it out, you know, because those are they're basically empty cabs. You know, you buy the cab, you put your own speakers in it, and off you go. But the one that I have is an oversized 212 cabinet with a pair of warehouse guitar speakers, Veteran 30s in it, and that is the Veteran 30s are warehouse guitar speakers. That's their Vintage 30 clone. You know, there's a couple of videos out there on YouTube, one in particular that sold me on these speakers. You know, that was A-Bing the Veteran 30s with the vintage, with an actual pair of Vintage 30s. And you know, I like the sound of the Veteran 30s better. You know, they were, you know, seemed to be a little bit brighter, a little bit, you know, a little bit rounder, you know, overall sounding. And in that that oversized 212 cab that I have, that's, you know, that's just got a lot of, you know, a lot of airspace in it. You know, it just seems to, you know, kind of bump up the bottom end for me a little bit more. And you know, it's, you know, running the right head through that amp, it's just perfect for me. While there are a couple of 212 cabs out there that have my attention, I'd really like to try one of those Heisu 212 cabs. I think they're called. You know, I know Ola England uses one on his channel quite a bit. You know, a vertical 212 or even a vertical, you know, Mesa Boogie Recto 212. You know, something like that. You know, actual Vintage 30 cab. Those are something that I would like to try. Tone wise, I can't really see how they would be how there would be that much of a tonal difference between their horizontal 212 equivalents. You know, some people say that there is, and there's even, you know, IRs out there nowadays that that I have a couple of, I think they're Engel cab IRs that I got from Two Notes in their Wall of Sound library, and it's the same cab. One's a horizontal, one's a vertical, and there is a definitely a noticeable tonal difference between the two. You know, most of the Wall of Sound virtual cabs I've found to be actually pretty accurate. So there is a tonal difference. You know, the reason I would be doing it would be for space saving reasons more than anything, because it's, you know, obviously a vertical 212 is going to take up less floor space, and you know, if you can't go out, you go up. At least in my house. At least that's kind of the way everything has become. That's why I got 2 pedal shelves above my desk out here now. So, you know, but as far as my favorites go, you know, my all-time favorite cabs would have to be the Mesa, you know, Mesa Boogie rectifier, you know, the oversized rectifier 412s and the 212s with the Vintage 30s, the Marshall 1960A. That's what I have with my JCM 900, and that cabinet is just loaded with the Marshall G12T75s. I actually like that speaker quite a bit because it's you know, it's, you know, 75 watt speaker as opposed to 60, so it's got a little bit more headroom in it, and, you know, of course, times 4 increases the additional headroom times 4. So, you know, a little bit more headroom in it, doesn't break up quite as early as a Vintage 30 or, you know, certainly a Greenback or, you know, Alnigo Blue or something like that. Let's see, the Marshall TV cab is, you know, the oversized Greenback cab. Is another one that I really like, and the orange PPC 412 and 212s for that matter. You know, I like the orange cabs quite a bit. You know, those things are heavy. I really wish they would put some damn casters on those things. You know, those things are insanely heavy and you know, to lug around, they use a lot of wood in those things too. But you know, because they're as heavy and as dense as they are, you know, they're meant to match orange amps. You know, they're real dark sounding. You know, so Vintage 30s are, you know, absolutely the right speaker for those cabs as well. You know. So, you know, those are some of my favorite cabs. You know, favorite speakers. You know, obviously, you know, as I've pretty much alluded to at this point, I'm primarily a Vintage 30 guy. I really like Vintage 30s, especially for the stuff that I do today. I also like you know, a lot of the warehouse guitar speakers actually are awesome. You know, the Veteran 30s I think are killer. The ET65s, which I think is their, what was that, a Creamback clone? Or something like that. That thing sounds phenomenal. They've got another one called a Reaper. I think they have the Reaper. Or is that the Eminence? Whoever makes the Reaper, that's a really good speaker. You know, but generally for what I do, you know, most of my stuff that I do nowadays is usually a Vintage 30 or a G12 T75, one of those two. So I've got a few other amps and a few other speakers, a few other cabs rather, that have some different speakers in it. One of them's got a pair of I got a Panama cab that's got a pair of greenback clones and a pair of Alnico blue clones in it, but I honestly I don't use it that much, and I probably should, but here lately I just haven't used it much. So there you have it. There's my list of my favorite list of cabs. I guess being a rock and metal guy primarily, that's vintage 30s or vintage 30s and oversized cabs are where I tend to land. So there you have it. Thank you both so much for submitting your questions. I always enjoy answering these. You too can also submit your questions via any of the methods that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. If you and don't forget to leave your questions and comments down in the comment section of this video. I will post links to anything I may have discussed here in the description so that you can go and check those out. And last but not least, if you haven't already, please consider hitting the subscribe button to this channel and the bell icon. It really, really does help out a lot, and your support really, really does mean a lot to me. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Stay safe, everybody.